Hello, I'm Dolly Duffy, the Executive Director of your Notre Dame Alumni Association, and I am honored to have been invited to present today's third annual Notre Dame Senior Alumni Veterans Day program. The NDSA is one of 9 affinity groups sponsored by the Alumni Association, and they do incredible work engaging with senior alumni all throughout the year. To learn more about the NDSA and their outstanding programming, visit ndsa.undgroup.org. During today's program, you will hear from Mike Saray, a member of the class of 1969, who is not only an Emmy Award-winning broadcast journalist, but he is a Marine Corps veteran and a Purple Heart recipient who served in Vietnam. In honor of this year's 50th anniversary celebration of undergraduate women at Notre Dame, Mike will be joined by 3 veteran alumni who have served our country with distinction. First is Rear Admiral Kathleen Creighton, a member of the class of 1988 and the winner of the Alumni Association's 2022 Corby Award for her distinguished service in the Navy. Next is Danielle Green, a member of the class of 1999, a former women's basketball student athlete and Purple Heart recipient who served with the military police in Iraq. And Lieutenant Commander Reinke, a member of the class of 2011, a former Notre Dame Navy ROTC midshipman and a recent graduate of Ohio State Law School. On behalf of the Notre Dame Alumni Association and the ND Senior Alumni, we are honored to be able to share their stories with all of you. Thank you so much for joining us on this special Veterans Day. And now, without any further ado, I'll turn the program back over to Mike Saray. Mike?
God, Country, Notre Dame. Not just a lofty motto etched in stone at the Basilica, a Notre Dame tradition of military service that runs deep. From Father Corby's chaplain duties in the Civil War, to the Navy taking over the campus in World War II for officers' training, many sons and daughters of Notre Dame have and continue to serve around the globe. On this, the 50th anniversary of women undergraduates at Notre Dame, our Veterans Day salute to Navy Rear Admiral Kathleen Creighton, class of 88, Army Sergeant Danielle Green, class of 99, Navy Lieutenant Commander Reinke, class of 2011. I'm former Marine Captain Mike Saray, class of 69. Rear Admiral Kathleen Creighton, class of 88. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Mike. It's my pleasure.
And I say trainer because most of your classmates will probably recognize the name Trainer and not Creighton.
Absolutely.
And also, I got to share, this is a long delayed interview that you and I tried to do in 2018 at Cyber Command at Fort Meade. And we were sitting down to do the interview and we got big-footed. Remember that day?
Absolutely. Yeah. A 3-star outranks I think I was a 1-star at the time. So yeah, absolutely. I understand that very well.
Yeah. We were just about to do an interview and then we got big-footed by a 3-star general and you were a 1-star. And I said, I'll be back. Well, I'm back. And it's 4 years later.
Awesome.
Thanks for joining us for this alumni event. And let me ask you first about your military experience in Notre Dame. Were you really bound for Notre Dame or were you thinking about other things about the military prior to Notre Dame?
No, absolutely not. I never thought about going to Notre Dame, which everybody I knew couldn't believe that because most people I knew, it was their dream. I really wanted to go to West Point and I had been working toward that, and I didn't end up getting into West Point, and but I did get an Army ROTC scholarship and a Navy ROTC scholarship, and I was sure that I thought I should go Army ROTC, and I asked my father, who was really my mentor in the whole process of joining the military, and I said, Dad, I should go in the Army, right? He was like, no, absolutely not.
Now
he was in the Army.
He was an Army veteran, so
yeah.
He probably knew better than anybody why not to do that.
Yeah, he was like, but the Navy's much better. They have much better duty stations and better uniforms. And I'm like, what? This whole time you've been telling me about the Army. So yeah, that was how I ended up in Navy ROTC.
So you end up at Notre Dame, and you said you were quite intimidated by the firepower, the academic firepower of your classmates.
Yeah, it was. Uh, I was. I roomed with some very impressive women. I think it was reflective of the time where Notre Dame at that point was about 35% women, and so it was a very high cut of folks. And turns out my three closest friends, who I remain very close to this day, were all the valedictorians of their high school.
Now, like many Notre Dame graduates, myself included, we ran into some real problems freshman year and were struggling to survive. But you were telling me a great story about who threw you the lifeline that helped you survive your freshman year at Notre Dame when you were struggling academically.
Yeah, I'm not sure if he threw me a lifeline or he scared me to death. But my mother, I told my mother I was struggling because I was taking 21 credits, including, all the hard stuff the freshmen take, chemistry and physics and calculus and all that stuff, ROTC and all that stuff. And I told my mother, I'm struggling. I don't think I'm going to be able to pass. And so she called the freshman year of studies and talked to none other than the dean of the freshman year of studies, which was Dr. Emil T. Hoffman, the legend that all Notre Dame freshmen who are majoring in a science or math take his class. And we called the class Emil. We called the quizzes, the Friday quizzes Emil. So a legend. So he calls my room on a Saturday morning, like 7:30. Like clearly, nobody was awake, and asked to speak to me. My roommate got the phone, and I got on the phone. He's Kathleen. This is Dr. Emil T. Hoffman in the freshman year of studies, and I was like, oh, ah! And so he's like, can you come to my office
Did you stand
right
up
now?
immediately? Yeah.
Yeah, right now.
Right
So I
now.
threw on my Notre Dame uniform. We had the blue sweatpants and the gray sweatshirt and ran across campus to his office. And I was scared to death. I had no idea what I had done. And, I went in his office and he was, he said, come in. And I came in there and he took my hand, turned me around, scared me to death to face this painting, or I guess it was probably a print, but a painting, one of those of where Jesus is suspended from the cross, like Superman style. And I was like, ah. And then he said, let's pray. And so we did the three prayers that we always did in chemistry, Our Father, Hail Mary, Queen of Peace, pray for us. And then he looks at me, goes, you're going to be fine. Go back and do well. And I was just like, ah. I ran home and called my mother and said, don't you ever call Dr. Hoffman on me again.
Boy,
Yeah, then I failed calculus and became a business major.
a business major.
Yeah.
Great preparation for what was going to be a very distinguished career in cyber warfare. We'll talk about that connection later, how you made that transition. But let me ask you, what was your thinking about ROTC? At the time, Notre Dame was 35% co-ed or women, and the Navy was less than 10%. How difficult was it being a female midshipman in 1984?
Yeah, we started the year probably with over 100 midshipmen. I'm going to say about 110, and we had 5 women. And I looked at them, some of these other women, I thought, wow, these women are impressive. I'm not sure I'm in the right group here. Impressive athletes and impressive, students. And I just kept showing up. I kept showing up and trying to do my best and trying to fit in. And somehow when we graduated, there was only 2 of us left, 2 women. And yeah, I'm not sure I really thought that far ahead. I mean, I certainly didn't think that the Navy would be a career. I thought it would be a good experience. I'm not even sure I realized that at that point with combat exclusion that I wasn't going to be, the job. I wouldn't have the jobs that most men had in the Navy, surface warfare officer, pilot, submarine, SEAL, none of that was, except in very restricted roles, was possible. And so, I'm not sure I never thought it would be 30 plus years, but I felt like it was a good thing to do. It was a great way to get a free education. It was, and it was a way to prove myself.
How do you think Notre Dame prepared you for the transition to the Navy, coming from a predominantly male environment into even a more predominantly male environment? What did you kind of field test at Notre Dame that became very useful in your career in the Navy?
I think primarily it was having really good friendships with men, to tell you the truth. So, I was normally, there were two of us, but most of the time we weren't in the same ROTC class. And so it was me and all the guys, and I ended up becoming very close friends with a bunch of young men. And that friendship, that ability to very easily relate to men, to male officers, it put me in good standing for, when I went into the fleet. And again, I was oftentimes the only woman, or one of a small group of women.
Mm-hmm.
That was one of the main things. Clearly Notre Dame, lays down this very strong moral, ethical, and framework, and also this commitment to service and something greater than yourself. That is crystal clear, and that echoes the Navy and the military in general. But the Navy's motto is honor, courage, and commitment. And to me, it's just like God, country, Notre Dame. It's different words, but it's all the same thoughts and all the same commitment to doing the right thing, to service above self, and all those ideals.
Did you ever feel that it was like a matter of kind of saving your powder, what battles to fight on these issues of kind of integration with men and whatever? Did you kind of, with Notre Dame, did it give you a chance to kind of feel that out, kind of know when to go to the mat and when not to on things?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great way to put it, keeping your powder dry. I let a lot of things roll off my back. I didn't make everything an issue. Wasn't the first to have a problem. I was kind of, this too shall pass. Everybody has their day in the barrel. One of the things I love about the Navy is just that it's like the best person to do the job, do your job. And if you can do the job, then nobody really cares, what you look like, or all those things. But I'll tell you, there was a situation where we haven't talked about this story, but where when I was on strike group staff, I was on the Enterprise strike group staff, or strike group 12 is and I did have an occasion where I was like, I'm going to make a fuss, because I just feel like this is not right. And it's not right just for me. It was something that was affecting me, but I knew it was not right for all the other women on the strike group staff and on the carrier. And that was that there was nobody trained to cut women's hair. So we were on a deployment for 6 months. They had no barbers who could cut women's hair. And, I kept bringing it up and asking about it. And I kept getting a lot of, well, we just didn't get anybody to school. And, you can do that when you go ashore. And, girls cut hair in birthing. All of these nonsense things that if it had been men, no barbers, it would have been, the end of the world. And so I talked to the XO of the carrier, I talked to the CO of the carrier, and I finally went to my strike group commander and I said, this is not right. And I got teased about it a lot, for bringing it up. But I felt like I did the right thing to bring it up, because it affected every single woman. And we had the right to be able to maintain our hair and standards just like men.
Hmm. So leading from the front, you.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of a minor thing, but it sounds kind of minor, but it's kind of major when you're on deployment and there's very few women, and it's the culture is just grin and bear it.
Now, the type of work you did in the Navy was really quite critical in this era, cyber warfare. You were kind of at the beginning of the focus on cyber warfare. How'd you make that transition from business administration to Notre Dame?
I was really going to get out of the Navy. After 4 years, I realized that I did not like what I was doing. The only reason I didn't get out is because my husband was in the Navy. And I realized that if I got out, then I would every, couple of years, I'd be having to find a new job. And, I didn't know how that would work. I'm sure it would have worked fine, but I didn't really understand it, how it would work. And so I said, well, let me stay in, let me try another job. And I got a job in communications and providing communications to ships who are underway or in port, and to the commands, on the base. And I fell in love with it. I absolutely found my passion and realized that I love this. I love this work. I love the mission. I love people. And then I asked to go to graduate school, and I got my master's degree in information technology management. So that got me some education background that I didn't get from accounting and marketing and commercial bank management classes at Notre Dame. So yeah, that got me. And then I did a couple of really intensive tours or jobs. Tours, what we call a job, where I did that kind of work on ship. I did it ashore in Naples, Italy. I did it ashore in London, in the UK. So I got really deep into it, and realized I loved it. And so that was communications, and then communications then became IP networks, working with the internet and the military's use of IP networks, and then how you secure those. So that's cybersecurity. And then that melded into the beginning, the stand up in 2010 of the Navy's cyber command, called U.S. Navy Cyber Command, Navy Cyber Command, and I'm sorry, Fleet Cyber Command. And so we stood that up in 2010, and so I was kind of on the ground floor of that. And then when I became a flight, and I went out to Bahrain for 2 years and did it out there. And then when I came back, and I was selected for flag. So jobs of increasing responsibility, and just as the warfare area was kind of being developed, the organizations were being stood up, the people were being trained, and I was kind of in a bunch of key roles as that was happening. So very fortunate.
So when you were assigned to a carrier strike force out in the Middle East area, I mean, during the height of the war against terror, there must have been some pretty critical information passing through your desk.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's a critical job. If you can't communicate, then you're dead. So it's a really easy job to feel like you don't have to tell anybody like this is important. People who are working for you, like, hey, this is what you're doing is important. Like, they intrinsically get that. They get that, like, this is important work. It's critical. Lives are at stake. But it was funny that was probably the hardest job of my career. I was a commander, so I was around 40 years old. I had 2 little children. One was like 17 months and one was 4.5. I left them, to go on two 6-month deployments. It was 6 months I was gone. I was back for 6 months, and I went away for 6 months again. And that was the hardest job that I ever had. And missing them and coming home to, you know, they didn't really know me. They didn't want to be held by me.
Do you think your classmates from the class of 88 and the general public at large appreciate those kind of sacrifices that military people make?
I hope so. I mean, the military is often, has gotten a lot of support from the American people, and is very trusted. And we work really, really hard. I mean, I'm retired. I've been retired now a year. I'm still saying we, like I'm in the Navy, but I know when I was in, we worked very, very hard to ensure that we never lost that trust of the American people, and we never did anything that could be. I mean, you hear stories, right? It does happen. There are people who break the rules, and there are consequences for those people, and they're harsh, but because they need to be, because we need to keep to never be looked at as taking advantage of that trust of the American people. But I don't think it was. Sure, it was hard to move every 2 years, but it was exciting. It was amazing opportunities, new jobs, new challenges, new shipmates, new places to see and learn. And I just, I hope that, let's say other Notre Dame grads, that they encourage their children to consider a career in the military, because it's been fabulous for me and my family. And I think it's a really amazing thing, especially for, I'll just speak for myself, for as a young woman, the Kathy trainer who my midshipman classmates knew in the class of 88 compared to, the person I am today. Much of that is shaped by, my experience in the Navy and all the responsibility and authority and opportunity I was given.
Now, as a newly minted veteran, you've only been out for a year now. Anything
Right.
that you do on Veterans Day as a family?
Just thanking people who served and remembering, how lucky we are as a country, that the people in the military, I didn't realize that the quality, there is so many extremely bright, dedicated, honorable people that I met in the Navy and the military in general. It makes me feel good for our country.
Kathleen, I think the university really recognizes the sacrifices you've made and your family have made, and bestowed upon you the annual Corby Award for military service. And were you surprised with that recognition?
I was absolutely blown away, and was so honored, but also just so touched, because one of my college roommates nominated me. I had no idea. I got a call about it, and I couldn't have been more shocked and honored. But yeah, it's just a huge, huge honor, and just very touching that my friends cared enough to spend the time to to write me up. It was very, very touching.
Well, again, thank you for your service. Congratulations on the Corby Award, and hope you have a wonderful Veterans Day with your family.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks for the opportunity to share with you. I guess this is the 50th anniversary of Women at Notre Dame. So to be part of this, it's really, really special. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen. Danielle Green, class of 99 and U.S. Army veteran from St. Petersburg, Florida. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Mike, for having me.
Now, St. Petersburg, now you're not from there originally, are you? You're a Chicago girl, aren't you?
I am a Chicago girl and partially Indiana.
And what motivated you to go to Notre Dame?
What motivated me to go to Notre Dame? You know what, Mike? I was looking for hope, and I was looking to escape. My mother was addicted to crack cocaine in the mid 80s, and I needed something to grab onto. So I used to watch Notre Dame football, And I just fell in love with the gold helmets and touchdown Jesus and the atmosphere. And at halftime, they would show military commercials. And I said, you know what? This will probably be my escape.
And how did you make that connection then from Chicago to South Bend?
Well, that connection actually came from basketball. So I discovered basketball at an early age. I knew I wanted to go to Notre Dame, but I didn't know how I was going to get there. And one day in PE, I was shooting hoops and I said, well, maybe I can play basketball in college. So basketball facilitated that transition from the inner city of Chicago to the University of Notre Dame. And now Hall of Fame coach Muffet McGraw discovered me at the age of 17. And when she offered me a scholarship and I went on my first visit, my official visit in 1994, I was hooked. The school spirit. I went to a hockey game. The place felt magical. And before I left to go back to Chicago, I committed.
So playing basketball, that's got to be tough, trying to keep up with the grades and the traveling and all that. A lot of pressure on you at that time.
Yes, it was a lot of pressure. I was not accustomed to the rigor of the academics. The girls were bigger, faster. It was tougher. It was the speed of the game. And I had a lot of adjusting. It took me a couple of years to adjust to the pace of the game of basketball and just the demand of what Coach McGraw was looking for. But after a few years, I figured it out.
It was interesting to learn that you were part of junior ROTC in high school, that you got connected with the military at a very early age.
Yes, I think it was always a part of my fabric. And I knew I was good at athletics, but I felt like Junior Reserve Officer Training Corps would give me that leadership and that discipline that I was looking for. And I really hope that when I attended the University of Notre Dame, they would allow me to participate in their ROTC program in basketball. But they said, no, you're here on a basketball scholarship. So that dream lay dormant for a couple of years.
So did you always think that you might serve in the military?
Yes, I always thought I would serve at some point in time. Before I left the University of Notre Dame, I actually talked to two Air Force recruiters. David Woods, he was part of our Notre Dame family. He introduced me, and I did some research prior to leaving the University of Notre Dame, but I just felt like the timing wasn't right. So once again, I put it on the back burner.
And then after you graduated from Notre Dame, did you go right into the military, or did you go into a professional career first?
So when I graduated from the University of Notre Dame, I did have a tryout with the Detroit Shock, and I made the final cut, but I wasn't good enough. So I went back to Chicago and I became a school teacher. I taught physical education, grades K through 8th, and I coached high school girls basketball. And I did that for 2 years. And then 9/11 hit.
So did that change everything for you at that point?
It took a couple of years later for me to decide that it was time. I was 26. At 25, I started doing research on the different branches, Navy, Marines, Army. And finally in 2003, I was ready. I said, you know what? I want to go serve. I want to serve in the United States Army. And it came down between military police officer or counterintelligence. And I selected military police officer because I felt it would be a nice transition to maybe FBI later on or DEA. And so I went that route. And people often ask me, well, why didn't you become an officer? Well, the goal was to eventually become an officer, but I went in and enlisted as an E4. And the goal was to become a sergeant, a non-commissioned officer, and then eventually go to officer candidate school and become an officer.
Mm-hmm. This being 2003, the Iraq invasion, was there any question in your mind that you would probably be deployed overseas?
So when the invasion occurred in 2003, I was in basic training, and there was whispers that there was a possibility that once we finished basic training and military police officer training that we would deploy, but it was just whispers at the time.
2004, you find yourself in Baghdad, Iraq, atop a police station that's under attack. What happened?
So May 25th, 2004, it's 115 degrees. I'm patrolling the rooftop of a police station on a 2-story building when two rocket propelled grenades hit 2 stories below, almost hitting the Humvee below. I remember one of the soldiers hollering, "Green, is everything okay?" And I holler back, "Sarge, I'm not sure." I grab my weapon. I get into the kneeling position. And as I'm about to return fire, I'm hit by a rocket propelled grenade. And there I am laying on my side, thinking that I was about to die.
Did you know the extent of your damages?
At the time, I did not know the extent of my damages, but I thought death was imminent. And I remember saying a prayer to God. And I said, "God, I don't know what I've done in this lifetime, but whatever I've done, give me the strength to be able to tell my story." And I wanted a child. And at that point in time, I felt a surge of energy hit my body, and I thought I could get up and run, but my body was too injured at the time. I could tell that the upper part of my arm was injured. I saw blood, and I looked down at my left thigh, and I could see that there was blood coming from my leg. At the time, my mind was giving me mixed messages about the arm, whether or not the arm was there, but I could not feel anything. So it was still uncertain at that point in time.
You were medevac to Landstuhl, Germany, the military hospital there. Had you lost your arm by the time you'd gotten there, or did they have to take it once you got there?
So when by the time I arrived to Landstuhl, the arm was gone. I found that out when I was in the green zone at the hospital, and that's where I was awarded the Purple Heart for wounds sustained on the battlefield. And so that's when I looked down at myself in the bed, that's when I realized one arm was shorter. My left arm was shorter than the right arm, and then it clicked.
After being a medevac to Germany, to Landstuhl, you really had fairly incredible God country Notre Dame moment. Tell me about who you ran into at the Army Hospital in Germany.
When they say Notre Dame extends globally, there is truth to that. So when I arrived to Germany, I'm greeted by a trauma surgeon, and I'm not really sure who he is at the time, but he introduces himself as, Dr. or Captain Tim Woods. He is the son of David and Eileen Woods, who were part of our fast break club and the neighbors of Coach McGraw. And so they were there visiting their son, and he calls them and he tells them, and they come and they're crying and they're smiling. And I remember telling them, "Hey, don't cry, I'm alive." And so we took a picture together, and they decided to take out their telephone and call Coach McGraw up. And they put Coach McGraw on the telephone. And I said, "You know what, Coach, after all those years, you tried to get me to use my right hand. Now I have no other choice." And I think on the other line, she was just in shock. There was silence. So when they say Notre Dame extends beyond borders, that's a true statement.
Were you aware of the tradition, the God country Notre Dame tradition, when you first came there, the inscription on the door at the Basilica, or was it something that you kind of learned throughout the process of going to Notre Dame?
I think God country Notre Dame is something that I learned throughout the process. Remember, when I was at Notre Dame, it was all about business. It was academics, and it was Notre Dame basketball, and just trying to stay afloat and not drown, while you're trying to do something special. And so I think it's something that I discovered when I was injured.
Were you the first member of your family to serve in the military? Immediate family?
I was not the first. I had an uncle who served in Vietnam, and he saw some pretty gruesome things in Vietnam. And I have a couple of cousins who served in Vietnam, and I have a couple of cousins in my generation who are still serving. So I was not the first.
Because of that, do you sense a different perception of veterans depending on when they served and how the general public and your colleagues react to them?
Absolutely. So when I became a clinical counselor with the Department of Veterans Affairs, I worked a lot with Vietnam veterans, and they talked about how they were treated and disrespected by the country when they came home. And my heart really, felt for those gentlemen. And so I'm thinking, when we came home, it was completely different. One of the first organizations to welcome me home was the Wounded Warrior Project, and they welcomed me home with a backpack. And because when you come home from the battlefield, you don't have anything. And so just that organization and many other organizations, they saw the struggle of our Vietnam veterans, and they vowed to do better, and they have. And it's been 20 years now, and you're constantly seeing programs evolve to make sure that this generation of veterans transition to civilian life is seamless. And so they're empowering us, and they're honoring us, and showing and giving back. And so everybody's can't serve our country. You can't join the military for whatever reasons, but we can all find ways to serve our community. And that's what we're seeing.
So when people say thank you for your service, Danielle Green, your service continues.
My service continues, and I tell them, you're welcome. And because I've been empowered by so many people, and I've been able to share my story, it motivated me to go back to school, get that graduate degree, and become a therapist and help my fellow veterans out, brothers and sisters. And if people need me to be a spokesperson or talk about my recovery, my journey, I'm all hands in. Only got one hand though, but I'm all in, because that's what it's about. It's about selfless serving and giving more, doing more. It's about servant leadership. We don't talk enough about servant leadership, and so that's what I'm here to do. And because I lost my arm, I know my purpose now. I know what I'm passionate about, and hopefully one day, I can leave a legacy behind for my little boy, Daniel, who'll be 8 years old soon, so he can follow. Doesn't have to be a mommy's, footsteps, but he can do something to make his mark on this earth.
Would you encourage him to join the military?
I'm not going to be the one to tell him what he can and cannot do when so many people try to put me in the box. It's his life, but I have to say, if we're going to war, I'm going to tell him to think long and hard about it, because, this is the effects of war. War is not pretty, but ultimately it will be his decision.
Is there anything that you do special on Veterans Day?
Well, I think on Veterans Day, I think about those who gave the ultimate sacrifice, those individuals who are no longer with us. So I try to pay tribute, whether it's just a moment of silence, just to pay tribute to those who have come before me. I think about the Gold Star families who no longer have their loved ones here, their husbands or brothers or sisters. I think about them, and I try to stay prayerful that people who are serving today, that they're not in harm's way. And I thank the Lord that I'm still here to serve and to give and to, maybe bring some level of comfort to other people. And I definitely sit down with my boy and talk to him what it means to be a veteran and what it means to serve.
Danielle Green, class of 99, Notre Dame, United States Army, sergeant, and still serving today with the Wounded Warriors program. Danielle, thank you for your service over all these years and going forward, and thank you for sharing your thoughts today.
Thank you, Mike, for having me.
Erin Reinke, class of 2011. Thank you for joining us from Ohio today.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, so what's the connection between you and the military? Was there always a family connection with the military?
So I think it goes at least as far back as my dad's dad. He was in the Army at the end of World War II. I think he was part of the occupation force during that time. But really, I think the biggest impact on my life was my dad. He was a Marine for 2 years at the tail end of Vietnam. Didn't go overseas, but he was a Marine. And then he went into the Army National Guard. And he retired from the Army National Guard here in Ohio as an E6. So
did you always think that you would serve in the military at some point in some capacity?
I don't know that I knew for sure that I wanted to do it. I think I always had an interest in that, and kind of growing up in a small town, it was always something kind of in the forefront of our minds kind of growing up, because we are so focused on those small town values and military service and things like that, that it had been an option. But until I really started researching ROTC as an option or an alternative to a military academy, I don't think I really considered it a serious path.
So your path was to go to the Ohio State, coming from a small town in Ohio State. But when you discovered Navy ROTC, did that lead you on a path to Notre Dame?
I think it did. I think also I was really heavily involved in band in high school. And my brother's piano teacher actually recommended I look at Notre Dame. It was not really on my radar at all, but really the band at Notre Dame, the Band of the Fighting Irish, was a huge kind of draw for me. And then I got more into researching Notre Dame overall, discovered ROTC as this path that potentially I could take to go to Notre Dame, and kind of all the traditions and everything that comes with NROTC at Notre Dame kind of brought me under the umbrella, and I just got really excited about it. So
you must like to march, NROTC and the band. Is that something you've always liked doing?
I guess so. It's funny. I never really thought about the big connection, but I would say I wasn't actually in the band the first year I was at Notre Dame. And I would say that drill with ROTC actually made me better at marching. And so it prepared me for band camp, of all things.
The camaraderie of Notre Dame and ROTC, the band, is that very similar to what you later experienced in the military?
Oh, absolutely. I think, wow, I can't even begin to describe the closeness that is Notre Dame. I mean, you know, right? And most of the audience probably has a really good idea, right? But I think just the instant friends you have with these really seemingly minor connections, and just kind of a shared understanding of certain aspects of your life, and kind of your shared values and things like that. I think the parallels between Notre Dame and the band and ROTC and the military are kind of infinite in that way.
Your decision to accept your commission, the east side of the Basilica, at the door where it's inscribed God Country Notre Dame, accidental, providential, or de rigueur for NROTC candidates?
It's interesting. I think we've talked about this a little bit, is I think the significance of that door has kind of evolved over the years. And I think the post 9/11 ROTC grads, and I think I've seen some pictures from recent years where graduates are still using that to commission next to. I think it's kind of become our kind of motto, God Country Notre Dame, right? I mean, Notre Dame, you can see that everywhere. And I think when we say Notre Dame, it's kind of inclusive of family too.
You mentioned that the guest speaker at your graduation in 2011 was Robert Gates, then the Secretary of Defense. Do you think, kind of growing up in that post 9/11 era, that there was a greater acceptance of the military generally around the country, and specifically at Notre Dame?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. I think, so I graduated in 2011. So a good 10 years after 9/11, and that rally around the flag mentality, I think, was still pretty apparent in most circles in the country. And so kind of that military service aspect was a path. It wasn't necessarily everyone's path, but I think there was definitely a lot of respect for people who did decide to do that.
How did the Notre Dame experience make the assimilation to the Navy that much more seamless or easy for you?
I think our shared history with the Naval Academy was an awesome kind of introduction to that school and to those graduates and those people, because I mean, for football games, we would routinely host midshipmen at Notre Dame. And then kind of that shared history that we have, that deeply ingrained all the way back to World War II with the midshipman training school. All of the Naval Academy grads I know are well aware of Notre Dame and kind of the significance of Notre Dame as an institution. And so kind of walking into a professional environment with a shared respect right from the beginning is just invaluable.
And what about the kind of the ethics-based community that you came from at Notre Dame? Did that translate pretty well into the Navy? Did you feel the same kind of foundation as a group?
I think so. I would argue one thing that Notre Dame does, I mean, again, I would argue better than most ROTC programs would be just this concept of service before self, right? And taking care of others around you, and just being there to help those that you're leading, but just kind of be a good person as you're doing it. And that ethical background, and taking every decision you make and examining it not from just a tactical or strategic viewpoint, but also how will this impact the people around me, and how could we mitigate some of those negative impacts. I think Notre Dame is an incredibly unique place in that we are so focused on kind of those Catholic values, right? And trying to walk through life with them.
So you studied political science at Notre Dame. You go into the Navy, and then you go on the world tour. So it really brought some real reality, a reality check to what you had studied at the university.
Absolutely. I can't say enough about how much studying at Notre Dame prepared me for going around the world. My first ship, we went to the Western Pacific, we went to the Arabian Gulf. And so the exposure to different cultures in a first-hand way was this awesome complement to my kind of formal education at Notre Dame. I focused a lot on international relations when I was at Notre Dame, took some French and Arabic classes. And so being able to say thank you in Arabic to a cab driver in Bahrain, like that's something that Notre Dame gave me that not everybody can say they have. So it was great. And then my second ship was out of Rota, Spain. And so we did Mediterranean patrols and Black Sea and Northern Atlantic, and just being able to go anywhere and find those little touch points to what I was taught formally in class. It was just invaluable. And being able to explain the why to my sailors, why we were doing things, what the importance of strategic deterrence was, those types of things was just great.
Now, having served in harm's way in the Gulf and other places, did you ever find that there was any conflict with your beliefs in what you had been brought up to do and what you were currently doing?
I think there's always a little bit of tension in the national security realm when it comes to ethics and values. But I would say that Notre Dame ROTC did an excellent job of walking us through just war theory and some of the different kind of classical approaches to conflict, and walking in and understanding kind of the good that can be done, even though maybe some of the negative impacts are less than ideal. Being able to look at that greater good that you're achieving, I think that was really important.
Was there ever an occasion where you really had to think about this? You had to stop and think and evaluate what your next steps are going to be?
Luckily, I never had a full combat deployment, so I never had any real critical incidents that really made me question kind of a life or death situation. But I would say there's definitely been some ethical considerations when it comes to some of the interpersonal things that occur when you're on a ship, especially going to port visits. You can imagine there's all kinds of interesting sort of experiences and things that people get into when you're out in a new place and you're seeing things for the first time in a different way than you would back home in America. And so I think being able to walk in with kind of a strong values base and foundation, I think that was invaluable.
Even though your generation was probably more inclined to serve in the military, your generation seems to be less inclined to join the traditional veterans groups. Do you hang out at the VFW Hall or the American Legion Hall? But you also seem to be more inclined to stay with the military. Tell me about your case.
I think it's difficult kind of as a female veteran, and I'm still a reservist as well. So I still have that touch point. And I think a part of it is identity, and that you want to remain connected to this amazing group of people that you've been associated with for years. But you also kind of, I think there's a little bit of a difference between that Vietnam generation and us. I think we, as a generation, kind of want to remain more connected to our families and kind of the folks that we spend our day to day with. And I think it's tough to make that jump in translation because I think we're still busy kind of with our lives and our families. And a lot of my friends have kids and they spend a lot of time with the kids. And I think in some ways it's looked at as more of a job at this point rather than a full on separate season in your life. And even some of my friends who have gotten fully out and kind of walked the path of full civilian, I think they were just ready to move on to that next season of their life. And they weren't necessarily ready to look back or wanted to look back. But I think as we get older, I think that might change because I think we'll be looking for those shared experiences that not everyone has.
Aaron, do you do anything special on Veterans Day? Having served, is there anything that you do as a special tradition, or is there a family tradition that's carried on through your family for Veterans Day?
So for Veterans Day, I try to do something, whether that's get with some of my other military friends or something. Kind of coming from a small town, we always had some sort of a ceremony or something like that. But I haven't lived in a small town in quite a few years. But I do try to get with other veterans around that time. Memorial Day, obviously, there's kind of a lot more reflection, I think, for us, because we look at those who've gone before and also kind of, I personally haven't lost anyone in combat, but I have plenty of friends who have. And so kind of being there and supportive for one another and remembering kind of that sacrifice is something that I think everyone that I know does try to do, at least acknowledge those days in some way.
Are you ever inclined to call some of your former NROTC classmates to check in on them in and around that time, Memorial Day or Veterans Day?
I think so. Yeah, I think kind of with all friend circles, your touch points kind of ebb and flow, right, based on how busy you are in life. But it does kind of give me pause around those times, and I think about, oh, what's so and so doing now, or what are they up to? I haven't talked to them in a while. I wonder how they're doing and where they're at. But yeah.
Aaron, you mentioned at the very beginning about the strong connection Notre Dame has with the Navy going back to World War II, when the Navy virtually took over the Notre Dame campus to commission officers. Did that make your connection even stronger when you were in the Navy?
Oh, definitely. Absolutely. It's interesting how things like that happen. And I think, every person is different, but I think for me, knowing I was part of kind of that legacy coming from Notre Dame, that, the Navy isn't just the Naval Academy. That's something significant, that we have so many Notre Dame ROTC grads out there doing great things. I've run into sailors over the years who've told me they've worked with other officers from Notre Dame and they always have great things to say. And I think that's just so telling for the way that Notre Dame develops officers. And I think it's just an excellent tribute kind of to that legacy that we have going back to World War II.
So Lieutenant Commander Aaron Reinke, class of 2011, thank you for your service. Thank you for kind of really embodying the God Country Notre Dame and sharing your thoughts about being a veteran on this Veterans Day.
Thanks so much.